breaks the go woke, go broke myth. That's what it says. It breaks the go woke, go broke myth.
Well, the Odyssey came out, and it was great. I really enjoyed the movie and how it was staged, how it leaned into the horror, and the nonlinear format made the story more compelling. It's a great movie, and unsurprisingly, it was a huge box office draw. Most critics and audiences seem to love it, and it's going to have some awards attention. So yeah, Nolan has done it again, making another Oppenheimer, bringing in the summer crowd for R-rated period epics shot in IMAX. But of course, there was another topic of discussion regarding the Odyssey. It's that old tune of the anti-woke backlash, getting mad that Lupita Nyong'o, a black woman, was cast as Helen of Troy, getting mad about the transition to Elliot Page being cast in the role of Achilles, even though he wasn't, getting mad about historical accuracy in a Greek myth, getting mad about the movie going woke, all the old predictable complaints. There was, of course, the old cry of get woke, go broke, but then the movie came out and that theory was proven wrong. Very wrong. And I'll be honest, I didn't look much into this whining leading up to the movie, mostly because it all sounded tiresomely routine. But since it's become the movie topic du jour recently, and movies are kinda my thing, I might as well address it. Now, normally I would cover one particular YouTube channel in detail when discussing movie discourse like this, but I don't really feel like cooking that much today. Do you mind if we just get Drive-Thru? Let's just get Drive-Thru. Hello, are you there?
Welcome to the YouTube junk algorithm. Can I take your order?
Yeah, what's in the Odyssey reactionary value meal?
Yeah, so it's a 4-piece pack. It comes with the flavors: conservative propagandist, faulty conspiracy, failed comedian review, and British style rant.
Okay, with the British style one, can I get that without any Gamergate? I don't want any Gamergaters on that one.
Hang on, let me check. Yeah, sure. No Gamergators, it's fine.
Okay, great. Then I'll get the value pack.
Any shorts with that?
No, I think that should be enough.
Okay, your order should be ready. Thank you, Drive-Thru.
Okay, and there it is. Thank you so much. All right, well, let's see what we got here. First up is conservative propagandist. And let's see. Oh, it's a Matt Walsh video. I mean, I've talked about his Daily Wire movies, but not really his movie reviews. Yeah, sure. Let's see what his dogshit take is on the Odyssey.
Now that Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey has been released to near unanimous critical acclaim and significant box office success, we've been told that all the criticisms made against the film prior to its release, mostly by conservatives, have been proven baseless, even embarrassing. Those who raised concerns about the movie should now hang their heads in shame and crawl before Christopher Nolan on hands and knees, begging for forgiveness, offering gifts of supplication like an ancient Greek standing before the shrine of Apollo. This has been the basic conclusion of commentators on the left and even a fair number of commentators on the right. The wokeness allegations, they say, have been refuted. The movie is an artistic triumph, a masterpiece, and now it is our job to show that we are culturally in tuned by joining in with the applause, or at least ceasing our criticism.
Damn, dude, calm down. It's a movie that did well after conservatives kept talking shit about it for weeks. Nobody is stopping you from criticizing a fucking movie.
And the general consensus is, as the general consensus so often tends to be, wrong. Now that I've actually seen the movie, I can definitively say that every single criticism from conservatives was entirely correct on every point. We were not only correct in our prejudgment, but much more correct than we ever knew.
Every point? I don't know, dude. Y'all really fucked up by thinking Elliot Page was going to be playing Achilles and were then proven wrong. That false prejudgment wasn't even a matter of opinion. It was factually incorrect.
You can judge a book by its cover most of the time, and the cover of this one had a gender-confused woman in a man costume and a race-swapped Helen of Troy. We judged those to be massive red flags, and turns out we were right. The Odyssey is indeed a 3-hour-long middle finger to its source material, to Western civilization, to white people, to Greeks, to literature, and to movie making in general.
Oh, wow. It's an insult to everything, huh? So it's an insult to white people for a cast mostly composed of white people. It's an insult to literature, even though it draws from multiple mythological stories, which seem like something that, Nolan would care about since, he has a degree in English literature. And it's an insult to movie making itself, with its on-set locations shot for IMAX and featuring many practical effects. Ah yes, that hack director Christopher Nolan who doesn't place any thought in his filmmaking.
It contradicts itself to the point that every important aspect of the story, from the plot to the theme to the characterization, is reduced to incoherence. The dialogue, in the rare moments where it's even intelligible, is often clunky and heavy-handed and wildly out of place. Most of all, the film does not feel like a story set in the ancient world, which is a fatal problem for a film set in the ancient world.
Ah yes, a movie set in the ancient world, and based on mythology. Attack on Titan Walsh, you do know that there's no such thing as cyclopses and witches and giants, right? Because if I were making a film about the ancient world where I was aiming for making the most historically accurate representation of that era, I don't think I'd include those elements.
It barely feels like a film at all, in fact. It has more the feel of a rough draft, a V1 that Nolan was contractually obligated to produce, which probably isn't far from the truth.
Oh yes, Christopher Nolan, the director who made an R-rated historical drama with Oppenheimer that brought in nearly $1 billion and won the Academy Award for Best Picture. Yeah, I'm sure that guy was contractually obligated to rush out a movie and not take his time to make the movie he wanted. That makes sense if you ignore everything about Christopher Nolan.
Everybody understands that with the rise of streaming services and the glut of content all over the internet, movie theater attendance has plummeted. Profit margins in the entertainment industry are lower than they've ever been. And at this point, now that Marvel has died, at least for now, there are only two reliable ways to fill theaters and generate significant profit, at least from the perspective of movie studios. And the first approach is to fund an existing IP, to include very recently viral meme IPs like Backrooms. And the second approach is to produce an event film by somebody like Christopher Nolan, an epic that has enough set pieces and feels big enough that people will be compelled to get off their sofa and pay $20 to see it. And that's what we have here.
Yeah, almost like the studio trusted Christopher Nolan to make whatever he wanted because they knew it would bring in audiences. That sure does make your contractually obligated unfinished draft argument fall apart now, doesn't it?
Nolan is done making original, risky stories that might not go over well. The days when he made Memento are over, for the simple reason that you don't need an IMAX theater to enjoy a film like Memento. You can watch it on your phone and get basically the same experience because it's a high-concept, dialogue-driven film with no reliance on giant monsters or 20 different A-list actors filling out the cast.
Christopher Nolan, throughout his lengthy filmography, has earned massive audience appeal and studio trust. Why wouldn't he go for bigger projects with the biggest budgets and hire an A-list ensemble? You really think he came out of Oppenheimer, which earned him accolades and a massive paycheck, and he thought to himself, you know what? I should make some cheaper thrillers that I've already made before. The dude has basically been handed a blank check to make whatever he wants at Universal, and he chose the Odyssey.
Not that there's anything wrong with giant monsters, by the way. That's actually one of the only good points of Nolan's Odyssey.
I don't know, Matatui. Those giant monsters really didn't sell me on this story being set in ancient times. I'm not so sure those monsters existed back then. Unless, of course, you believe that they did, and if you do, why aren't you mad about how the Cyclops looks? The Cyclops originates on the islands in the Sicily region. Does that monster look Sicilian enough to you? I didn't hear an accent. What an insult to Sicily. Mamma mia.
With very few exceptions, films like Memento are no longer interesting to the big studios or to directors like Nolan. They're only interested in greenlighting films like this one.
Have you actually looked into the history of Memento? Because it wasn't a movie that studios were thrilled about. That movie was an independent thriller with nonlinear editing that several big studio distributors passed on, thinking the audience was too stupid to follow it. New Market Films, the company that optioned Nolan's script and gave him a budget, ultimately decided to distribute the movie themselves, which is risky if you're a small independent film studio that doesn't normally handle that kind of thing. It was a gamble, and thankfully, it worked. Memento quickly became a cult hit, and bigger studios that passed on the movie felt very silly. So no, Memento wasn't some revelation of a movie that big studios looked at initially and said, "Oh, good job, Nolan, here's a fat distribution contract for your low-budget thriller. Maybe make a Batman movie in the future." Big studios have always thrown the biggest amounts of money at low-risk projects and usually passed on smaller original projects. This is not a new thing just because the box office is down. Of all the Christopher Nolan movies that you could have highlighted to make this point, you chose the worst example.
Now, to be sure, if any director could withstand those pressures, you'd think it would be Nolan. He's about as bankable as a director can possibly be, but you have to wonder, especially after the flop that was Tenet, if he's lost his will to do anything particularly novel or outside the box. Tenet lost something like $100 million for the studio, which was only partially because of COVID. People didn't like the movie for the understandable reason that it made no sense. So now, after that catastrophe, maybe Nolan is more concerned with protecting his image, which is why he's increasingly relying on established stories and massive ensemble casts.
Okay, is he seriously going to misremember all of Nolan's previous movies? Because yes, Tenet was a failure, but for a variety of reasons and not just because the movie didn't make sense. Matt Walmart mentions that the movie faced issues due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but do you know when Tenet opened in theaters? It was September of 2020, making it one of the first big movies to hit theaters while we still didn't have a vaccine. There were a lot of people too terrified to go to the theater at that time, and many theaters still weren't even open yet. So that seems like a very bad time to release a $200 million action sci-fi thriller. Tenet was the last movie Christopher Nolan worked on with Warner Brothers. This is a huge deal considering that he'd been working with that studio since Insomnia back in 2002. What made Nolan decide to walk away from WB was how they handled their 2021 movies. Warner Brothers made the controversial call to favor a hybrid release for all of their theatrical films for that year. So in addition to movies like The Suicide Squad and Dune releasing in theaters, they'd also be streaming on HBO Max at the same time. From an audience perspective, this was very convenient for those who didn't want to go out to the theater but still wanted to watch a new movie at home. Unfortunately, this was a nightmare for the directors of those movies, considering that, Warner Brothers didn't tell them about this. The studio was intentionally sabotaging potential ticket sales with this streaming option. And Christopher Nolan, a director who knew his worth, said, "This is bullshit," and left the company for one less likely to fuck over their directors. It's also very funny that Matthew Walsherick seems to imply that Christopher Nolan is playing it safe after Tenet. Really? You seriously think Oppenheimer is playing it safe? I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're not a director playing it safe if you move to another studio so that you can make a 3-hour, expensive, R-rated historical biopic with sex scenes shot in IMAX. You don't make a movie like that unless you've got some balls to show Cillian Murphy's balls.
The Odyssey is a striking example of a director who, whether he's aware of it or not, is terrified of failing to meet expectations. He wants to give everybody, from audiences to the suits at Universal Pictures, exactly what they expect. And that means he must adhere to every norm in Hollywood, from DEI casting to one-dimensional characters and lots of sentimental nonsense.
Christopher Nolan made Universal a shitload of money and earned them a ton of awards, which got him a beefy bonus. Why the fuck do you think he would need to bow to the norms of Hollywood? Most Hollywood executives would freak out if you proposed them an expensive 3-hour R-rated epic to debut in the summer.
It also means that Nolan has to participate in Hollywood's larger objective, which is to subvert American culture by making everything gayer, more feminine, less patriotic, more depressing, and of course, less white.
Oh no, an adaptation of a Greek myth features characters who are not white. And by characters, I mean supporting characters who have considerably less screen time than the mostly white cast. Also, Nolan must have missed the Hollywood memo because where's the gay in the Odyssey? I didn't see any of that in the movie based on a Greek myth, which is kind of weird considering the homoeroticism present in these stories.
Now, I've seen people desperately trying to describe this film as path-breaking, awe-inspiring, even transgressive. almost as if they're trying to make it true by saying so. But infusing modern liberal values into an ancient story is pretty much the least transgressive thing a Hollywood director can do. It's utterly cliched and expected, not the slightest bit challenging or interesting or bold. Nolan's not interested in telling transgressive stories. He's too afraid. And at least that's one theory. I mean, you can make up your own explanations for Nolan's motives.
Yeah, okay, just make up bullshit. It's not like you can look up what Nolan said or anything like that. Just manufacture reasons why you thought Nolan made a version of the Odyssey that you didn't like. Just say Nolan was too afraid not to cast black and trans people. It doesn't sound correct or based on anything credible, but hey, that's just a theory. A dumbass theory.
And to begin with, yes, this movie was just as woke as we thought it would be. The DEI casting in particular is far worse than we knew. Far worse.
Elliot Page, Lupita Nyong'o, and Zendaya. Casting you all bitched about for characters who are hardly in the movie.
Nolan's version of ancient Greece is a kind of multiracial utopia. Well, perhaps not utopia. Actually, Nolan's ancient Greece is relentlessly drab and dreary and depressing and colorless. All the buildings look like ancient ruins, which, yes, it makes sense for those buildings to look like ancient ruins today, but they would not have all been ancient ruins in ancient times. So this is not a utopia, but in Nolan's vision, it is nonetheless absurdly diverse and multiracial. Blacks and Asians, Hispanics, somehow all coexisting in the Mediterranean 3,000 years ago.
Cyclops, witches, and giants in a mythological tale set in ancient history? Totally fine with Wat Mulch. But black and white people coexisting? Now you've ruined his immersion.
Nolan does not softly coax the audience into the DEI net, easing us into it slowly but surely. No, he cranks the diversity meter up to 1,000 from the very first frame. The first character we see is the rapper Travis Scott, who somehow manages to turn in a bad performance despite appearing on screen for 12 seconds. He got 12 seconds and he completely botched it somehow.
I'm sorry, if Travis Scott giving a thunderous introduction to the story of Odysseus for a few seconds is DEI cranked up to 1,000, that's a good sign that you're a racist. Maybe stop watching any movie with black people if this bothers you that much. Also, why the fuck should Nolan ease you into his diverse cast? Do you need a trigger warning or explanation why a black character appears on screen?
The defenders of this film, especially on the right, have tried to claim that Page's appearance is not a huge problem because only has a small role. You've probably heard that. It's a very small role. Now, I don't want to ascribe sinister motives to anybody or accuse them of lying, so I will generously assume that the conservative commentators making that claim must have fallen asleep 10 seconds into the movie, which would be totally understandable, frankly. If they actually watched the entire thing in a state of full consciousness, or at least half consciousness, then they would know that Page is not a minor character in this film at all. Utterly pivotal to the plot. One of the most important characters in the entire film.
He has a combined screen time of roughly 5 minutes in a 3-hour movie. And sure, his character does play a part in Odysseus's grief and regret amid war, but again, not the biggest role, especially since he wasn't even in the original Odyssey poem.
He is more than that, and as Steve Deese has pointed out, the moral conscience of the story. Inclusion in this film, in that role, is without question one of the wokest, most radically left-wing things we have ever seen in a mainstream Hollywood blockbuster film. There is no doubt about that.
I really doubt that.
To claim that a movie is not woke when there's a trans-identified pretending to be a male Greek warrior who serves as the linchpin of the plot and the film's moral conscience is just ridiculous. I mean, if we're going to rightly claim that it's woke to have a brown-skinned Hispanic Snow White, then how can we possibly argue that there's nothing woke about a trans female portraying an ancient Greek warrior?
Yeah, it's almost like all this bitching about wokeness is inconsistent and doesn't make any sense. Though I must admit, I'm glad it's fracturing his side of the political aisle. The more time they spend tearing each other apart means there's less time that they can spend pushing bigoted causes and propaganda. So let them fight and eat each other. They've had this coming.
You know, I'm not saying that Nolan had to go full Mel Gibson and have the characters all speak in the original language of the source material, although I personally would have appreciated that. But I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm saying that if you're going to make a movie set in the ancient world, the characters should speak in a way that sounds and feels ancient. Having them speak in a modern accent using modern slang and modern colloquialisms interferes with the immersion into the film.
Speaking of a movie about Jesus Christ, one of the best movies about Jesus was The Last Temptation of Christ. I loved how that movie tackles spirituality and highlights more of Jesus as a man than the Son of God. But for a cast that boasts Willem Dafoe, Harvey Keitel, Harry Dean Stanton, and David Bowie, the characters in that film do not speak like they're from Judea. And it's fine. I don't mind it because the performances are genuine. The Odyssey would be far more distracting if the actors all attempted to perform Greek accents that likely would have been scrutinized to death. And I would much rather take Travis Scott's more natural cadence than him trying and failing to pull off Greek.
And yet you'll hear some conservatives defending Nolan on this point. Their main argument, as best I can tell, is that the DEI casting is relatively minimal and doesn't take up much screen time. But even if that were true, and it's not even close, it's extraordinary to watch how quickly conservatives are willing to cave in scenarios where their opponents would never dream of doing so.
Yes, keep fighting each other, you gross-ass weirdos.
Now, if you're a conservative and you're unwilling to tell the truth about what's happening here for fear of being labeled a culture warrior or something, God forbid. We don't want to be culture. You wouldn't want to fight for the culture. Well, who would want to do that? That's silly. That's ridiculous.
It is silly, because you're ridiculous. The amount of factual errors you've made about Christopher Nolan thus far is embarrassing, and anybody who repeats what you said about Nolan is going to look like an idiot in front of anybody who knows anything about movies.
But if you have those reservations, you should know the left has no such reservations. They explicitly want future generations to see Western culture as a universal product, as the outgrowth of modern-day diversity with no distinct contribution from whites.
Whites contribute nothing? You are making this point about a movie with a white protagonist and a mostly white cast that was directed and written by a white man.
Now, when I made this point on X, I was informed that actually white people are supposedly doing the exact same thing. I was told that there are plenty of films, recent films, where white actors are taking roles where they don't belong as an effort to stamp out other cultures. And as evidence of this proposition, I was informed about the existence of precisely one movie called Gods of Egypt. And this came into my feed a bunch of times because I made this point about if this happened in the reverse, everybody would be upset. This is the only movie all of a sudden, everybody was Gods of Egypt. Like no one's ever heard of that movie. Well, as you can see from the poster there, the film features Gerard Butler and Geoffrey Rush, who don't appear to be Egyptian. And yet they're starring in a film called Gods of Egypt. So there you have it. White people are trying to erase non-whites from Hollywood. I have to admit it's amusing, if nothing else. People are desperately searching for an example of a modern movie that's been race swapped like The Odyssey, but in the opposite direction. And the best they can do is some obscure film nobody's heard about from 10 years ago that nobody watched and has a 15% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, I can do better than that. How about a movie from this year with Wuthering Heights? That movie race-swapped Heathcliff, who was viewed in the original text as black. Or how about 2014's Exodus, Gods and Kings, where Christian Bale and Joel Edgerton played the Egyptian characters Moses and Ramses. Or 2017's Ghost in the Shell, where Scarlett Johansson played the Japanese character Motoko Kusanagi. Or 2010's The Last Airbender, where white actors played the cartoon characters that were closely associated with Asian and Inuit cultures. There are a ton of examples, MATLAB Walsh, and the fact that you think the only relevant example is Gods of Egypt just proves how little you understand movies. Okay, so there's a point in the review that addresses the criticisms from Emily Wilson, a translator of The Odyssey. She brings up some interesting points about how Odysseus was portrayed as being more thoughtful of shame than lustful for glory. It is a fair criticism in terms of what Nolan decided to change, and something that Wilson recognizes as a desire for stories to be less ambiguous. I don't think this ruins the movie's appeal, but it is a unique difference in the adaptation. So, after playing a clip of Emily saying this, what does Metabolife take away from her words?
I think it's a film that has some interest in shame, but I don't think it has any interest in glory.
Well, she's right. I never thought I'd say that about someone that looks like that. And when she says that, by the way, that Odysseus uses drugs to deal with his trauma, that is also in the movie. He's essentially taking like the ancient equivalent of SSRIs to help deal with his depression. I mean, that's what's in this movie. I'm not making this up.
Oh, in case you're wondering, he's referring to the lotus flowers.
This is the same woman, by the way, that we just saw, who suggested that Odysseus was a problematic hero, who says that he's complicated in her translation. She routinely chose words to make Odysseus seem less heroic and noble, so she clearly is coming at the story from a feminist modern perspective. And even for her, Nolan's film was a little too weepy, a little too morose.
Yeah, the movie was not a version of the Odyssey that worked for her, which is fine. Not everybody has to like it. And even with these thematic changes, it might not ruin the film for somebody familiar with this text that would like to see a different angle. That is what makes new adaptations more exciting. If you're just retelling the same story exactly the same way over and over, it gets stale. That's why some people don't retell the same story and craft something new from an old text. The point being that Wilson's criticisms of the movie come from a particular angle that might not align with everybody's opinion, and that's valid. But that doesn't invalidate everybody else's positive opinions, and pretending it does is a rather childish way to read the reactions to this movie.
The best films set in the ancient past are able to transport you to that world and, crucially, show you the world through the eyes of those people. That is the magic of film, at least good films. And Nolan never achieves this. He never comes close to achieving it. He never even tries, it seems. In Apocalypto, Mel Gibson transports you into the mind of a Mayan 500 years ago.
Oh yes, Apocalypto, famously known for being historically accurate of Mayan culture. Right? No, it fucking wasn't. Apocalypto received plenty of scrutiny from historians and scholars. Many of them noted how the art and architecture were more of a mashing of Mayan culture that doesn't historically align. Aside from the details, there's also the more concerning aspect of depicting Mayans as barbaric people. The human sacrifices in the movie were closely associated with the Aztecs rather than the Mayans. Human sacrifice wasn't off the table for the Mayans, but they were way more selective about who they sacrificed than just anybody off the street. Julia Guernsey, a professor of Mesoamerican culture, brought up how the Mayans were a rather sophisticated people, and this portrayal was incredibly racist. When she was interviewed by Statesman, she said what she really thought about Apocalypto. Quote, "I hate it. I despise it. I think it's despicable. It's offensive to Maya people. It's offensive to those of us who try to teach cultural sensitivity and alternative worldviews that might not match our 21st century Western ones, but are nonetheless valid." Hey, wow, look at that, Matt Walsh-Shaboopy. This woman who studies Mayan culture claimed that the movie you're praising was imposing a modern American view on a past civilization. You know, the thing you got mad at the Odyssey for doing. This sure makes your argument fall apart. Quick, find a better example.
In The Northman, Robert Eggers transports you into the mind of a Viking 1,000 years ago.
You got lucky. The Northman has been noted as being more historically accurate, so sure, a broken clock can be right once a day.
And in The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan transports you into the mind of a liberal woman in 2017.
Oh, I hate to tell you this, Matt, funny suffix, but 2017 was 9 years ago. You're old and out of touch, man. Get better material.
There's one encounter like this in the Odyssey where Odysseus and his men come across a bunch of giants wearing armor, and the giants end up attacking them and damaging their boat and killing a bunch of them. And as far as I can tell, the point of the sequence is to show off the costume design of the giants so that the giants can be featured on marketing materials like this one. As you can see, and it looks really cool. I mean, it does look cool. They can put it on posters and blast it all over Reddit, and that's kind of it. The scene doesn't really serve in Nolan's story any purpose beyond that. It doesn't advance the story that Nolan is telling.
That was a genuinely exciting scene that further underscores how Odysseus is losing the trust of his men in the direction that he leads them. I don't know why he's complaining about this. Like, do you not want to go to an epic film and see cool shit?
Even the Cyclops scene, despite being one of the best sequences in the film, feels abbreviated and ultimately kind of empty in Nolan's telling. It's missing something. Even the good scenes in the movie, when they come up, there's something missing here. And what's missing, in the case of the Cyclops scene, is the wit and humor of the original, because Christopher Nolan has an apparent religious objection to including anything witty or humorous in his films.
Maybe because there's a thematic point that he's trying to stress. Maybe going for humor in the deeply scary Cyclops scene would undermine the tone.
Now compare this to, say, the Coen brothers, just for example, who are able to write scenes in pretty much all their movies that are both hilarious and suspenseful and disturbing at the same time. And much of this movie needed that kind of touch. It needed that kind of tone where we can do two things at once.
Christopher Nolan and the Coen brothers have far different directing styles and tone. They don't have to be the same, and it's very weird to suggest that directing should be that homogenized.
There was one point where the conservative critics, some of them at least, were wrong. The movie is not a flop. And not all conservative critics predicted that it would be, but to any that did, it was not a flop. It's a hit. It's a massive hit. Christopher Nolan is a cultural force, the likes of which does not exist on the right at all. And we have to grapple with that fact. We have to do something about it besides complaining. Otherwise, we're going to watch as guys like Nolan continue to defile and defame the great works of Western civilization in front of an audience of tens of millions of people.
Be real here. You're not going to do shit. Like, seriously, what are you going to do about the appeal of Nolan's Odyssey? Make some embarrassing counter-programming that nobody will take seriously? Of course you are.
We have to admit that Nolan succeeded. He accomplished all of the goals he was trying to achieve. And in the process, he has created one of the most successful pieces of propaganda in the entire history of Hollywood. The fact that even conservative critics are strenuously defending a movie featuring a trans with top surgery in a pivotal role only proves that fact. And that's why we need to get to work. By the time Christopher Nolan is delivering his Oscar acceptance speech about his brave casting page as a Greek warrior or the many nuances of Zeus's law, we should have our own faithful production in the works.
Yeah, totally. The Daily Wire should make their own counter-programming. Like that time they made their non-woke version of Snow White to compete with Disney's Snow White. Oh wait, they never finished that project. I don't think you have the resources to make that competing film. You better pony up your remaining cash for an AI movie, and pray it doesn't come out looking like absolute shit that nobody will bother watching.
The only coherent message of Nolan's film is that conservatives have become far too complacent.
Or maybe, just maybe, the conservatives realized all this woke bullshit that they're whining about really doesn't matter. They still went and saw the film because they don't give a shit about issues like this. Okay, so that's the end of the video. So goodbye, Matterhorn Walsh. Have fun arguing with Ben Shapiro since he liked the Odyssey. Okay, next up we have the faulty conspiracy video. These are fun to debunk. Let's see what we got here. Oh, it's AVA Pop Culture. Never seen one of their videos before. Let's see how it tastes.
And you had all the IMAXs full. And then if you went outside of IMAX, not so much, because we walked up the day of and bought tickets to a large format screen without a problem. And I live in one of the biggest counties in the country. Okay. So it wasn't that hard to get into. And the regular screenings haven't been hard to get into either. And they are really kind of, I'm not going to say they're cooking the books on this, but there is definitely some miscalculations and some sort of half-truths and sort of overlooking a few things here.
Oh, I've heard this one before. This idea that a movie isn't making that much money based on lackluster anecdotal evidence. I've covered this with Captain Marvel, and there was nothing viable proving it. Alien vs. Alien doesn't really prove anything here either. All he's doing is just looking at his local theater showings that are not sold out and just going, doesn't it feel like Universal inflated their ticket sales?
The first headline, and this is just one of many just like it, the Odyssey's epic box office haul breaks the go woke, go broke myth. That's what it says. It breaks the go woke, go broke myth.
Yes, I can read the headline. Would you like to elaborate instead of just repeating yourself in a silly voice?
Here you go. You have all of these things where it proves the Odyssey is dominant. That Nolan doesn't need Barbenheimer. He doesn't need anything like that to sell tickets. This is nothing but a handful of trolls who complain. Forget the fact that between two trailers, there's over 1 million dislikes.
Who gives a shit? Dislikes don't translate to box office numbers. The movie's success just proved that. Do you think anybody talking about this blockbuster's successful box office cares about how many dislikes the trailer got? It is just totally irrelevant.
But it's just a handful of trolls, and this proves that we just need good stories, and things like Ghostbusters 2016 were just financial disappointments because they weren't good stories and because you trolls made them that way. You're the ones who made it bad.
The article does bring up a good point, though. Ghostbusters 2016 didn't fail because it was woke. It failed because it wasn't a good movie. Correlation does not equal causation.
The Last Jedi, a similar lightning rod. But it wasn't really a bad movie. It was just the trolls.
Oh, I don't know how to break this to you, Apple Vinegar Association, but The Last Jedi came out 9 years ago. But even if 2017 wasn't 9 years ago, citing The Last Jedi is a terrible example of going woke and then broke. Because that Star Wars sequel made $1 billion at the worldwide box office. Now you might say, well, that movie still soured people from going to the next Star Wars chapter, except no, it didn't. The Rise of Skywalker also made $1 billion. That movie sucked, but I don't think the perceived wokeness of The Last Jedi drove away audiences.
People have actually gone in because there are hackers out there in this world. There are people who can get to the back end of your page content, and you can see that the actual overall audience score is not 97 or 99, something ridiculous, putting it ahead of like Lord of the Rings and Gone with the Wind and epic movies of all time. It's not that. It's more like a 57 from the general audience. It's down in the 50s for the general audience reviews.
Yeah, it would be 56%. If you counted the unverified reviews from those who didn't buy tickets. Rotten Tomatoes implemented this verified review format to prevent review bombing. This isn't some well-kept secret. Rotten Tomatoes just trusts the reviews of those who bought tickets over those who didn't. However, even on websites that don't require you to verify that you bought a ticket, like say IMDb, the review scores are still rather high, sitting at an average of 8 out of 10.
And they've blocked that. They've systematically blocked that. And that is, a company protecting itself, because ultimately Rotten Tomatoes is owned by the same company that's put out this movie. So that's a company protecting itself and protecting the message right there.
You're not wrong in that Rotten Tomatoes is majority owned by NBC Universal. But it is also partially owned by Warner Brothers. And if you're implying that Universal fixed the review scores of their own movie, why didn't they do the same for the Super Mario Galaxy movie? Because that movie had an abysmal critic score. So where's the review protection on that movie? Or did Universal just forget to censor reviews that time?
My own review, I gave it like a 5 out of 10. And publicly, and I said that I think you could have a justification for anywhere from a 2.5 to maybe a 6, depending on if you're just a massive Nolan fan and things like that. Anything above that is, you got to justify it a lot more, in my opinion. Anything below that, you got to justify it a whole lot more, in my opinion.
I don't give a shit about your review metric. What's your evidence that Rotten Tomatoes is censoring reviews beyond highlighting a Twitter post from a user that you somehow didn't reveal the name of?
And the whole numbers and the stats for the whole woke doesn't mean broke articles that everybody's running with off of this one movie, this one example, are being finessed and changed and filtered and controlled. They don't really represent real life. So the 97% isn't the real audience verdict. It's the one that made it through the gate is what happened.
But none of this proves that the movie wasn't a financial success. What the fuck are you talking about?
So it's not that the film failed. I wanted the film to not recoup, because I think when it does, all of these incorrect messages are going to be reaffirmed to Hollywood, and it's going to set us back years from the progress that we started to make this year. It's going to set us back.
Nobody cares, dude. Nobody cares that this movie's success is going to spread more wokeness into movies. Nobody cares about that. Nobody. But you and a bunch of sad conservative losers. So yeah, that was a shitty video that didn't take much effort to dismantle. I don't think I'll be watching one of this guy's videos ever again. Kind of sad, though. I was hoping that he was going to present some damning evidence, but it's mostly just him repeating old grifter talking points and getting very mad at a movie article where he keeps repeating his own manufactured arguments. What a waste of a video. But hey, I mean, I did order Drive-Thru Discourse, so I can't be too shocked at what I got. All right, next up is Failed Comedian. I'm excited about this one. This could be anybody. Let's see what we got here. Oh. It's Adam Carolla. He's still around, huh? Okay, fine. Let's see how much worse he's gotten when it comes to talking about movies.
Lupita Nyong'o.
Lupita
Helen
Nyong'o.
of Troy. Okay. I don't care who you are, whether you're from olden times or new times. You cannot be the most beautiful woman in the land or the fairest woman in the land. I don't care what color you are, even though I said fair. If you got literally less than an A cup up top. I'm tired of Hollywood trying to push off dudes who look like girls who look like teenage boys with their shirts off is the most beautiful. I'm sorry.
So you think she's a member of the? You don't like the itty bitty titty committee ladies? And you don't think
you know what
that
you can
a
be?
small-chested
You know what you can
woman
be?
can be the most beautiful in the land?
You can be cute. And you can be attractive, and you can be a lot of things,
Lupita's
but you can't.
Stunning.
I know, but she has a concave chest.
Oh, this is way too greasy. I don't think I can finish this video. It's too gross. It's just an old, washed-up comedian complaining that Helen of Troy doesn't have big boobs. Like, is he actually going to talk about anything else in the movie, or
Zendaya's going to get thrown in that flat-chested group too.
She's stunning.
With a cup.
No, she's bigger.
I don't know.
Okay, I'm afraid to say what size I am now.
holy fuck? Oh no, this is gross. No, I'm done with this shit. You know what? Throw it out. It's not worth interrogating. Just rancid. Okay, last video, and this is British flavor. Let's see what we got here. I'm kind of curious. Damn it. I specifically told them no Gamergators, and they gave me Carl Benjamin, a.k.a. Sargon of Akkad, a.k.a. failed political candidate. Just... Okay, maybe I can just, like, scrape it off.
Suck it up, chuds. Normie Christopher Nolan fans went to watch Christopher Nolan's film. But you feel stupid now, don't you? I guess I must. I mean, I went to see Christopher Nolan's film. This was the first Christopher Nolan film I've ever watched. I watched some of the Batman one with the Joker in, with Heath Ledger as the Joker. But the thing is, I'm not a Batman fan. And I didn't go to the cinema to watch it. I can't remember why I didn't watch the whole thing either. But then I tried watching Inception, and I found it really ponderous. And it was really taking ages to get into it. And I was just like, I'm just going to do something else. It didn't grip me. It didn't captivate me. And so far, I hadn't finished any of his films. Apart from the Odyssey, which I did go and see to pay.
Oh, great. Because if there's one opinion I want to hear about a Christopher Nolan movie, it's from somebody who doesn't fucking watch Christopher Nolan movies. You know, all those little movies like The Dark Knight and Oppenheimer that not many people watched. Hopefully we're going to get some insightful commentary, not some dogshit take from some dork who doesn't really engage with movies much.
We get this kind of thing. At the minute, there have been loads of these articles, so they're like, you can feel the sweat dripping off of their... I'm not going to be mean. The sweat dripping off of their faces. they were bricking it for this. You could see the memes like, oh God, it's Elliot Page, the 5'0" that we're going to have playing a warrior in this film. Oh God, please don't let that suck. And then it's like, yeah, we're going to have this African woman playing Helen of Troy. And you could feel the buttholes puckering. It's, oh no. You could tell they were just like, oh God, please don't let this be a massive flop. We've all come together for this woke, race and gender swapped Odyssey. And you could feel the tension on the woke lefty side of the room.
I didn't feel any of that shit. I think you made it up. I mean, I wasn't worried about the movie being a failure since this was a Christopher Nolan movie, and his films tend to do really well at the box office. So it wasn't that much of a shock that the Odyssey performed incredibly well with ticket sales and audience scores.
You could feel them. They're just like, God, it's the dude looking at the phone and smoking. It's like, holy shit, please don't let this flop. And it did okay. It did okay.
No, it didn't just do okay. For those not familiar with box office numbers, making over $200 million worldwide on opening weekend is very impressive. In fact, it's the highest international debut for a Christopher Nolan movie, which, those already do heavy numbers. But you wouldn't know that since you don't pay attention to Christopher Nolan movies. I'm sorry you didn't finish The Dark Knight or Interstellar, but many people did. And they liked those movies, which might explain why they like The Odyssey and went to go see it.
Like, it's done okay. Like, normies were like, oh, The Odyssey. Because there was this huge media push. Rotten Tomatoes, like 97% from the critics and the audience. Literally all of them stood in a row and were all like, The Odyssey is the most wonderful film ever. This is just incredible. And it was exactly like the video I said, this is how I know this is going to be shit. It's because they never said anything of substance about the plot, about the characters. They just said, oh, amazing cinematography, a little bit clunky, but it was generally amazing. Amazing, perfect. I mean, it wasn't. It was not very good. And I bet that this just sinks like a stone after this news cycle, and nobody really thinks about it.
Okay, so the following Wednesday, the box office gross for The Odyssey was the second best box office for a Christopher Nolan movie, just behind The Dark Knight. The Odyssey is projected to outpace his previous movie, Oppenheimer, and is on track to hit $1 billion by the end of its run. So maybe shut your mouth on this topic, Carl Field, because you're going to look as idiotic as those conservatives who thought Barbie was going to flop after one good weekend. You're not even basing this prediction on anything. It's just lazy vibes.
This felt like, for some reason for them, a cultural moment. They were like, oh yeah, we're gonna subvert one of the sacred touchstones of Western civilization. And it's like, listen, you've been doing this for years, right? You've been bastardizing things for years. I'm shocked you haven't already bastardized the Odyssey. I'm shocked you haven't bastardized the Iliad. And when you bastardize anything of the original that I actually know and love, I don't care anymore.
Oh, okay. You don't care anymore about this perceived subversion of movie adaptations. Then you shouldn't care about what this article has to say about the anti-woke mob that was complaining about the movie. I mean, you should, but you don't.
It's so weird that Christopher Nolan couldn't allow it to be the Odyssey as well, because you just want to tell a different story. And you just wonder, why didn't you just do a modern reinterpretation then? Like, I've seen people on Twitter posting about, well, have it so that he's some Iraq war veteran who gets lost coming back from Iraq, and a plane comes down in the ocean or something, washes up on an island, and has to get home with some of his men or something like that. And he ends up, on the island of the ganja smokers in Jamaica and, Epstein's Island and stuff like that. That would actually have been a really interesting movie to do.
That version of the Odyssey sounds fucking stupid, and not at all something Christopher Nolan would write or direct.
I'm not personally bothered by this, but I bet there are loads of chuds on the internet who are offended, so I'll take their position for this video.
But why, Carl's Jr.? Why do you need to take the chud position? I thought you said this didn't bother you. Why do you need to defend the crybabies who were bothered by this movie? Unless, of course, you are in that camp.
Despite their go woke, go broke agenda. And, well, I mean, that's just what normally happens. I mean, look at, what was it, The Little Mermaid, Snow White. There was another Disney princess one the other day that I can't even remember what it was, but it completely tanked. Like, it does keep happening.
Movies like that bomb because they're not good movies. The 3 underperforming Disney remakes that he's talking about, The Little Mermaid, Snow White, and Moana, they had low critic scores. Meanwhile, another Disney remake, Lilo and Stitch, received higher scores and went on to make $1 billion. You see, when you cherry pick examples of movies that have financially failed and blame wokeness, it becomes far harder to defend that point when a well-made movie with this perceived wokeness does really well. If it truly is wokeness that is killing movies, then how do you explain Barbie, Mufasa, Wicked, or Superman? Did those movies just get lucky, like the Odyssey, or did audiences just not give a shit about the cries of wokeness?
The anti-woke trolls have been blown clean out of the water by the success of Nolan's Odyssey, straight out of the gate. Man, loads of things that are complete shit are insanely popular with normies.
Whoa, hang on. Wait a minute, Carl Locomotion. You just said audiences were rejecting movies like remakes of The Little Mermaid and Snow White as proof that wokeness ruins movies, but now, when they accept movies like The Odyssey, they're just normies with terrible taste in movies? Which is it, Carl Benji the Hunted? Are general audiences rejecting wokeness, or are they just normies who don't know about wokeness? Do you see how flimsy this mindset can be?
And that seems to be Christopher Nolan's entire modus operandi. Pose as some sort of intellectual, create a film that actually isn't very complex to understand, and then give everyone a pat on the back for feeling clever after watching it. Like, that's literally what his entire movie career seems to be. From the people who I have watched talking about his movies.
You didn't watch any previous Christopher Nolan movies, Carl's for Kids. How the fuck would you know if Nolan's movies are pseudo-intellectual? You based your opinions on listening to other people talk about his movies. Stop borrowing the opinions of others and go make your own by watching Nolan's movies if you actually want to talk about his body of work.
The Odyssey had already landed near universal rave reviews from critics, including me. Someone who was particularly excited, although a little anxious, to see it after studying classics at university. Again, you can feel the tension. They were like, oh, God, please. It's going to really hurt. It's going to be like Ghostbusters 2016 all over again, but worse.
It has been 10 years, and people like this still won't shut the fuck up about that Ghostbusters movie.
But it was also the film that launched 1,000 online disputes, so it was way more than that. The month-long wave of incensed backlash the Odyssey faced on social media. Ironically, the rage is coming exclusively from people who haven't yet seen Nolan's film, if they ever will. Well, I've seen it, and, I mean, I didn't like the race and gender swapping, as usual, but it's not unexpected.
The writer is clearly talking about people who haven't seen the movie and saying shit they don't understand without proper context. You know, like how you formed an opinion of all of Christopher Nolan's movies after watching none of them, except for the one you watched this year.
The African woman who played Helen of Troy. I was watching, I think it was Disparu's video on it the other day, and he's got a clip in there of her literally saying, I didn't know anything about the Odyssey, and making this movie was my education about the Odyssey. She literally doesn't care. They literally do not care. And why would this African woman give a damn about the Odyssey? Why would she care? It's not her culture. It's not something that's an inheritance of hers.
First of all, learning about a piece of literature through appearing in a movie adaptation does not mean you don't care. Secondly, Lupita Nyong'o, the actress you keep referring to as African, was born in Mexico from Kenyan parents. So she's technically Kenyan-Mexican, given that her name is, Lupita. And thirdly, what the fuck do you mean she wouldn't be interested in the Odyssey because it's not her culture? Even if she didn't grow up in a region that would be considered Western civilization, that does not mean she wouldn't care about the Odyssey. Many people have read the Odyssey around the world. Quit gatekeeping literature, Carlos Luchadores.
Helen never existed. There's no reason to think this, actually. In fact, we've got the catalogue of ships in the Iliad is actually really, really interesting because it does actually seem to attest to an actual Bronze Age list of a coalition, right? There are cities in the catalogue of ships that didn't exist by Homer's time. So it must have been a memory of an earlier time. And another thing as well is the fact that they don't ride horses, they ride chariots. Well, if it was just something that had been made up, why would they think that they didn't ride horses? And in fact, in the Odyssey movie, they do ride horses, so that didn't happen. And everyone uses bronze, whereas actually by Homer's time, they were all using iron. So it's one of those things where it's like, you can't really say that these people didn't exist, because actually there's every chance that they did, and that these are just... I mean, I'm not saying the stories are accurate, but there's no reason to think that there wasn't a named person called Agamemnon or Helen.
What the That's your evidence for Helen of Troy being a real person because somebody back then might have had her name? That's not proof, Carl Benjamin Button. You might as well argue for the existence of the Cyclops at this point.
How people then can become enraged that this not real character, not true.
No, it is true. Helen of Troy, the daughter of Zeus, is a mythological figure, and there's no credible evidence that she actually existed during that era.
Not being blonde-haired and blue-eyed is simply unhinged and racist. Okay, so what if it is? But also, why wouldn't you want to portray the character as Homer described her? She's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white-armed, Helen in particular. So you chose the darkest-looking African woman you could find, and one that wasn't particularly good-looking?
Lupita Nyong'o looks amazing. Fuck you.
Elliot Page plays Ithacan soldier Sinon, ported over from Virgil's Aeneid. Yeah, why not use Achilles? And a lot of people are like, well, they probably... originally, when the rumor came out that Page was playing Achilles, and everyone was like, are you serious? And they were like, no, it's Sinon. Maybe they changed it before the release.
They didn't. This is made up bullshit. Nobody takes this whining seriously. Except you, apparently.
There's a lot of ignorance here. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Whatever. This is just not the film that we were promised.
Nobody promised you anything, because people like you who bitch about wokeness weren't a factor of the movie that Christopher Nolan wanted to make.
And then you've got like this sort of conservatives on the right, Winston Marshall, Dave Rubin, all that, who are like, oh, no, the Odyssey was a masterpiece. It was a brilliant anti-woke masterpiece. No, it wasn't. It was not an anti-woke masterpiece. And they very much stretch Nolan's interpretation. Nolan is no fool. He knew very well the symbolism of casting a gender dysphoric woman in the role of Sinon. No. And it's the same with the African Lupita Nyong'o, who he specifically went out of his way to get for the role. Now, I don't think that he did this because he wants to own the wokies. I think he did this because he wants to make a point about, well, politically against the right. I mean, it just seems that that's the case.
Christopher Nolan has stated in interviews that he cast Lupita for her strength and poise as an actress. I'm pretty sure that's why he cast her, and not because he wants to mock conservatives. That just sounds silly.
I think it was woke, and Nolan made it woke on purpose, by design, and I don't know what his reasons for that is, and I don't really care. Because, like I said, I'm not going to... Once this discourse is over, I'm never going to think about this film again. I think almost everyone is going to feel the same about it.
Yeah, sure, totally. I'm sure that speculation will pan out coming from somebody who never watched a Christopher Nolan movie until this year. Well, that was a greasy series of videos with a lot of empty calories and ideas, so let's end this video on a healthy note. Now, we can laugh at these people for their bad takes, in fact we should, but there's another concerning aspect to what they're bringing to the table. If these are the only conversations we're having in movie discourse, we can lose sight of more genuine criticism. Because while so many conservative losers were bitching about the casting of black and trans people in a Greek myth, there was a more important controversy. The filming of the Odyssey was conducted in Dakhla of the Western Sahara. This territory is under Moroccan occupation, where the indigenous Sahrawi people have had their land stolen and rights violated in the form of imprisonment and silencing any form of protest. Many became refugees and were forced to flee. A visiting film crew is given more human rights than the people who live there. Shooting in an area where an entire people have been displaced is deeply concerning, especially given the context of the movie having similar themes. This location might have been valuable to Christopher Nolan as a filming site, but the location shooting contract was certainly a political move by the occupying Moroccan regime to make them look good. Even though I love the movie, this is a huge problem that can't and shouldn't be excused. Whether it affects your view of the movie or not, it is an issue that should be talked about. The most prominent voice talking about this is Mohamed Labat, a Sahrawi artist residing in a refugee camp in Algeria. He voiced his disgust in an article for The Guardian. Topics like this aren't covered as often in film discourse because it's not as provocative or engaging. Laughing at right-wing dorks freaking out about casting and historical accuracy in a Greek myth is more entertaining. It's also easier to digest than the paradoxical dread of how a movie's production might have been party to enabling a regime built on destroying a culture. I'm still processing my feelings about this, despite really enjoying the movie, and honestly, I can't fault anybody for not wanting to see the Odyssey on these grounds. And I know that this is a lot of heavy stuff to take in, but the last thing I want is for people who have deep compassion about this real plight to be lumped into the same camp of crybabies who shit their pants because a movie was too woke. You are not some loser like the ones I showed in this video if you dislike the Odyssey on personal and moral grounds that are genuine. And honestly, you shouldn't have to worry about that association. Because while these annoying voices might be loud online, they ultimately do little to affect a movie's appeal. We saw it happen with all of them arguing that Nolan's casting of black and trans people was going to make this movie a box office bomb. And they were wrong. It wasn't because there was a conspiracy or that they miscalculated their predictions. It's because they're far disconnected from the zeitgeist they think they still have a grasp on. They don't control the narrative anymore or sway public opinion with their tired rants. And with that humiliation, it's up to us to frame the argument into something more meaningful and thoughtful than fast food junk. So yeah, sorry for getting Drive-Thru, everybody. I'll cook something much healthier in the next video. Unless I'm tired.
Good morning, welcome to McDonald's.
And a bright good morning to you, madam. Let's see.
Some of the baddest motherfuckers on the planet are on that plane, all craving action. Whatever you want to wager on, the money plane has you covered. You want to bet on a dude fucking an alligator? Money plane.